If you're like me with acne but struggle to tolerate a retinoid, then this video is for you. Hi, my name is Ayo. In today's video, I'll be sharing with you 10 tips on how to use a retinoid if you have sensitive skin like I do, so stay tuned. Tip number 1 is to start out slow to build tolerance. So what this means is not starting out using it every single night, but to start out slow. And for me, it took me about 7 or 8 weeks to get to the point where I was able to use it every single night. Actually, I started out using it every single night for a couple of days and my skin was so dry, itchy, and so irritated. So I ended up stopping that, restarting. And so my regimen looks something like, started out twice a week for like 2 weeks, increased to 3 times a week for like another 2 to 3 weeks, went up to every other night, and eventually got up to using it every single night. But this took about 7 or 8 weeks to get to nightly use, and that really helped to get my skin used to being on the retinoid and basically building tolerance. Tip number 2 is to avoid duplication of irritating ingredients in other products like your cleansers and toners. And for me, the big one was exfoliants. I remember when I first started out on the retinoid, my dermatologist had recommended that I start using the SkinCeuticals LHA cleansing gel, which is an exfoliating cleansing wash. And oh my God, did my skin just burn. Yeah, not a good idea when I was just starting out on a retinoid. And so I ended up switching over to the CeraVe hydrating cleanser and keeping my routine very simple and minimal, just a hydrating cleanser, the retinoid, and a basic moisturizer. And it took me about probably 2 to 3 months when my skin was already used to being on a retinoid and I was already built the tolerance to it. Then I was able to introduce other ingredients. So simple and minimal when starting out works out best. Even now that I have been using a retinoid for several years, I still only exfoliate once a week with like lactic acid. So I use the lactic acid 5% one night a week. And on that night, I don't use my retinoid. And that's all that I can tolerate with my sensitive skin. Tip number 3 is to use the sandwich method, where you apply a thin layer of moisturizer initially, then you apply the retinoid, and then you finally seal it again with a moisturizer. So it's something like a moisturizer, retinoid, and a moisturizer. There is another method that some people recommend where you mix in your retinoid with some moisturizer and then apply it. I don't like that method because I don't think you can really get like an even distribution of like the retinoid all over. So I prefer the sandwich method. And this helps to decrease the irritation that you experience with the retinoid because you already have a layer of moisturizer on your face before you apply the product. Tip number 4 is to protect the very sensitive areas of your face with an occlusive product like Vaseline. So these areas would be like the corners of the eyes, the corners of the nose, and the corners of the mouth. And so this acts as a barrier for preventing the retinoid to come in contact with those areas, because those are very sensitive areas. If you're liking this video so far, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And my favorite tip, I'm saving that for the last, so make sure you watch all the way to the end. The next tip is making sure that you're applying the appropriate amount of products, and I'll show you. Let's go. Okay, so I've just washed my face. I'm going to apply a thin layer of moisturizer, like a simple basic moisturizer. And so the moisturizer acts as a barrier to protect from irritation from the retinoid. Okay, so wait a few minutes until the moisturizer is completely absorbed and your skin is dry. And then you can apply like an occlusive ointment. I like to use Vaseline, and I just take some and apply it to like the really sensitive areas. Corners of the eyes. Right over here is another hot spot for me. Corners of the nose and corners of the mouth. Then you want to apply a pea-sized amount of your retinoid. This is about a pea-sized amount. You don't need a whole lot. Just apply dots across the face and then connect the dots. This allows for a thin layer of retinoid. Wait a few minutes until that is completely absorbed and dried. Then you can seal it in with the moisturizer. And when you're starting out, I just like to keep it simple and use like a very basic moisturizer. I like the CeraVe moisturizing cream and also like the La Roche-Posay body cream. Those are very simple, basic moisturizers that work well to reduce irritation when you're just starting out on a retinoid. The next tip is to make sure that when you're doing any kind of like procedures like waxing, threading, retinoling, dermaplaning, make sure that you're stopping the retinoid maybe a night or 2 nights before actually doing those procedures, and this helps to minimize irritation to the skin. When it comes to underneath the eye, if you're using a prescription retinoid product or even over-the-counter adapalene, I'd be very cautious using it underneath the eye area since the skin here is really thin and can get really irritated from using a retinoid. For me personally, I don't use my prescription retinoid underneath my eye area. I use retinaldehyde, and the product I use is this, the Aven Retinol Eyes. This is a retinaldehyde product, and I like retinaldehyde because it's pretty effective. Like, as a retinol, it only requires one step to get converted to retinoic acid, which is the active form. So it's pretty effective and also gentle compared to other forms of retinol. So that's what I use underneath my eye area. Let me know down in the comment section, do you use your retinoid underneath your eye area? Do you use your prescription retinoid, or do you use one of the over-the-counter retinol products? Let me know in the comment section. So of course, the next tip is to, of course, wear SPF year-round. A broad spectrum sunscreen that's SPF 30 or higher, especially if you are prone to hyperpigmentation. This is a must year-round. Just doing this on a daily basis makes it easy to form a habit. So personally, I use SPF year-round. Now, my final tip, now this is if you have moderate to severe acne. It can be a challenge to try to treat your acne and at the same time trying to decrease irritation to the skin when you have sensitive skin. If you're on like the moderate to severe spectrum of acne, you likely need a combination of products like benzoyl peroxide, topical antibiotics, retinoids, and these ingredients already be irritating on its own. So it can be beneficial to see a dermatologist so you can get access to prescription medications where you have these combination products already. For example, there is like the Epiduo, which is adapalene and benzoyl peroxide. There's Twineal, which is tretinoin and benzoyl peroxide. Newer generation, meaning these are retinoids that are designed to be less irritating compared to like tretinoin. And so there is like Altrino, Retin-A Micro. These have like specific technology designed to allow for like a slower release of tretinoin when it's applied, so that makes it less irritating. There is also Arousal, which is what I use. This is a potent retinoid, but the way it's formulated to be less irritating. And when I started that, I basically experienced no irritation at all. And so these newer generation retinoids, they're just awesome compared to like, just like the OG tretinoin. So that's just something to consider if you are dealing with like severe acne, but also have sensitive skin. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're on a retinoid, SPF is a must. Personally, with my sensitive skin, I don't use chemical sunscreens because it's just irritating, especially around the eye area. I prefer to use mineral sunscreens. So I'll link up here to my favorite mineral sunscreens that I'm using right now. So make sure to check that out. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Until next time, bye.